This is Isekai, the genre that has captured the hearts of many and has continued to grow into one of the most commonly seen genres within the anime community. Isekai is the combination between two Japanese words, I meaning different and Isekai meaning world. And while I did call it a genre earlier, it is more of a plot device than anything else. Because isekais can be anything, as long as there's a main character experiencing a different setting than they're used to. Isekais can include but are not limited to transportation to fantasy worlds, going back or forward many centuries in time, or even traveling to a different planet. However, there's still debate over what constitutes as an isekai, because in Dragon Ball, Goku and Co literally travel to alternative planets, different dimensions, separate universes, but isn't considered an isekai. While Inuyasha, Kogame stays on the same planet and only travels back in time, but is still considered by many an isekai. So to have some semblance of consistency within this video, I will focus on fish out of water stories involving characters traveling to another place. This can be different planets, universes, or even time in some cases. But where did this traveling and dimension hopping all start? Transportation to another world isn't some sort of recent phenomenon. People fantasized about different realms for as long as stories were being told. One of the oldest ones is of course the story of heaven and hell, a place where the righteous and righteousness would reside after passing, which was a story that was created around 4000 years BCE. However, this was less a work of fiction and more of a belief system. And if we're solely talking about works of fiction involving traveling to the afterlife, then the earliest work I could find was Orpheus and Eurydice, a Greek mythological tale about Orpheus traveling to the underworld to save his dead bride Eurydice. As Orpheus was the best musician of the land, the beautiful music he played with his lute allowed him to pass the guard dogs of hell and get a free ride over the river Styx to meet with the keepers of the underworld and ask them to allow his bride a few more years on earth. However, this doesn't quite fit the typical fish out of water narrative, as Orpheus navigated the underworld with the same ease as I traveled my local supermarket. So I guess we have to fast forward a bit more till we get to the 8th century of Japan, with a tale of Taro from Urashima. Yes, the first proto-isekai is in fact a Japanese story. It is about a fisherman named Taro, who sees some children bullying a small turtle. Taro saves it by paying the kids to leave. The next day, while at sea, Taro is invited by a giant sea turtle to come to the underwater kingdom. It is explained that the turtle he saved that day was the princess of the kingdom. Taro is cited by many to be the earliest another world stories to still survive. While not technically a story where the main character is transported to another universe or a realm, it is a story where the main character Taro is brought to a place where he is unfamiliar with the customs and rules, both because it's a society of fish on the water, but also because of the high society Taro had to deal with compared to his low status when he was back in Japan. Another famous story showing that people really like self-insert isekai is Dante Alighieri's Divine Comedy, a 3-part book series where the main character, Dante himself, teamed up with the spirit of the great historical poet Publius Vergilius Maro, commonly known as Virgil, as the two best buddies travel to the levels of hell, purgatory and eventually paradise. This self-insert fanfic following Dante, where he gets to meet all types of cool historical figures like Julius Caesar, Saladin, Frederick II and Odysseus. This was the first epic that really showed off the potential of a still non-existent isekai genre, and during the later half of the second millennium, these types of stories really would pop up more and more. After the Age of Discovery put most of the world on the map, people were still curious about discovering the unknown. The classic Gulliver's Tale follows the tale of Gulliver, a ship surgeon that encounters all kinds of weird islands that haven't been discovered before, like the island of Lilliput with very small people, Brobdingnag, where he is the small one among giants, and during his third travel he visits all kinds of weird or interesting islands like Laputa, Balnibarbi, Laknak, Glubdubtrip and Japan. Somehow, even before isekais has been officially invented, we seem to keep returning to Japan. But as our physical world started to be fully discovered, stories about discovering new fantastical worlds were being written all by guys named Lewis. Alice in Wonderland, Chronicles of Narnia, and Peter Pan are still stories that carry so much power even to this day, of children discovering these interesting magical worlds that go further than just the "oh hey, let's look around this interesting world" and leave. Unlike the previous example with Dante and Taro. They are either trapped in this fantastical world and wish to return like Peter Pan and Alice in Wonderland, or they are part of an ongoing struggle in the world like in Narnia. These characters are introduced to a world with ongoing storylines, like the White Witch taking control of Narnia, with the main characters joining the resistance fighting against the White Witch and her eternal winter. But the story that is most like a modern day isekai is the Mark Twain's A Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court. I mean, wow, just look at the title. If you were to hide this title among other light novels, I doubt I could even tell the difference. Aside from the title, A Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court is also a story about a 20th century engineer who is sent back to the Middle Ages during the reign of King Arthur and uses his engineering skills and 20th century knowledge to modernize this medieval kingdom of King Arthur. This type of story is still very prevalent in early to popular and current day isekai. Even experts in light novel genre drew a comparison between A Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court and modern isekai. But it wasn't until the late 1900s when Japanese animation finally started to become more popular, thanks to the rise of Astro Boy in 1963. It wasn't long after, in 1965, that the first proto-isekai-like anime started popping up. Gulliver's Travel Beyond the Moon is a reimagination of the earlier mentioned Gulliver's Travel and showcases some staples that still are used to this day, like having the main character be hit by a truck and waking up in a new world. However, in Gulliver's Travel Beyond the Moon, there's a whole 30 minutes of him waking up after being hit by a truck and actually traveling to another world by rocket, before he actually wakes up in a foreign land. Gulliver's Travel Beyond the Moon follows a boy named Gulliver. Accompanying him are a scientist, a dog and a crow as they travel to an alien planet that has been terrorized by an oppressive force. The good robots were driven off by the bad robots, and even now as the good robots have moved to another planet, the bad robots still follow them and attack them. And Gulliver and the gang take it upon themselves to help the good robots from the evil ones. This anime didn't make any headwaves in both the anime and isekai sphere and is by many forgotten. But I still think it's worth mentioning it in this video, as it still shows an early sign of escapist fantasy that isekai came to known for in anime. 12 Kingdoms was the next story that revealed glimpses of how isekai will eventually become in the future. In this light novel, a schoolgirl named Yoko Nakajima being transported to another world after being attacked by magical monsters in her world. During its release, 12 Kingdoms got a small but dedicated fandom that only grew over time due to its intricate world and solid writing. The next story that followed was Fushigi Yugi, a series about a high school girl named Miyaki Yuki who, along with her best friend Yui Hongo, is transported into a mysterious book called The Universe of the Four Gods. This manga was one of the most popular shoujo mangas of its time and did probably a lot of legwork bringing over female manga fanbase into the isekai genre. And a big one I mentioned in the intro was Inuyasha, a proto-isekai that travels time instead of worlds, with Kogame Hirogashi, a modern-day high school girl who falls into a well at her family's shrine and is transported back in time to the Sengoku period in Japan. There she meets a half-demon called Inuyasha, who seeks to become a full demon. Together with a group of allies, they embark on a quest to collect the shards of the Shikon Jewel, before these shards fall into the hands of evil. It is a story still popular to this day, and to many nostalgia-goggled individuals, they see this as one of their favorite mangas still. It is easy to see why. It brings a memorable character in an interesting world where the interactions between Kogame and Inuyasha are still being discussed to this very day. Some lesser known or less influential mangas on OVAs during that time were: Magic Knight Rayearth follows three girls who are transported to a magical world called Saphiro and must become legendary magic knights to save it. A Vision of Escaflowne centers around a high school girl named Hitomi who is transported to a mystical world of Gaia and becomes involved in a war between nations while navigating complex relationships and secrets of her own destiny. this one became way more popular way after its release. El Hazard, The Magnificent World, tells a story of a group of students who find themselves transported to a fantastical world of El Hazard, where they become embroiled in political intrigue and must find their way back home. Now and then, here and there, follows a young boy named Shu who is transported to a dystopian world and becomes involved into a brutal conflict where trying to protect a mysterious girl named Lalaru. These were all stories released in the 1990s. And while a lot of them have some basis in Isekai and world transportation and whatever, they still aren't very close to what we are now known as the Isekai genre. I still think they are very important to discuss and to mention because they still existed. Transportation and other world stories have existed, even in anime, for as long as the anime genre has almost existed and has thrived. However, we are now nearing the end of the 90s, and as we're nearing the end of the 20th century, we as humanity also started to enter a new world ourselves, a digital world. So it is fitting that the most popular proto-isekai of this time was one that explored that very world. Digimon Adventure released in 1999 as a companion show to the digital pet toys of the same name. This anime transported several children who were named the Digidestined into a digital world to beat their own Digimon that can evolve, fight and have to protect the digital world and the real world. As Digimon is one of the only few anime franchises that I have mentioned in this video that still has relevant anime, games, mangas or movies still coming out, I expect you to know what this series is somewhat. It is a juggernaut of a media franchise with some reports even saying it grossed over $6 billion in revenue, making it one of the biggest franchises in the entire world. So aside from its position as a popular media franchise, it will keep its place as one of the earliest examples of mainstream isekai anime. But another thing that made Digimon very important to the isekai genre was its inclusion of the digital world that I mentioned earlier. While Digimon took it very literally by putting the main characters in some sort of virtual world where the Digimon are some sort of software and or a virus, the idea of placing and trapping your characters into a virtual world would be emulated not long after the success of Digimon. Only 3 years after the release of Digimon, a young author by the name of Reki Kawahara wrote his first volume of Sword Art Online as an entry for the 2002 ASCII Media Works, but couldn't enter it as it exceeded the page limit of the competition. A few years later, in 2008, he entered another story in the ASCII Media Works competition. This time it was Excel World, and he won first prize. With the fame he gained from winning the first prize, he decided to republish Sword Art Online in print. This time gaining popularity much faster than it did before. Sword Art Online was getting an anime adaptation only 3 years after it being republished. Sword Art Online combined the popular video game genre of MMORPG, futuristic VR technology, and trapped in another world genre together to make an intoxicating cocktail. Both Sword Art Online, the light novel, and Sword Art Online, the game within the light novel, were inspired by games as Ultima Online and Ragnarok Online, and introduced gameplay mechanics into this fantastical world. And when the promised day came and the anime came out, it was everywhere. And when I say everywhere, I mean it was an anime no one could stop talking about. It was by far the most popular anime of the year, where forum discussions of the show could run upwards to several hundreds of comments. It was the anime even non-anime fans were watching. It was this anime that started the spark that would later result into the isekai explosion of which we still feel ripples of 10 years later, where many isekais to this day still use RPG and video game elements in their story and or power systems, even though some of them aren't even taking place in a video game world. And while other popular isekai did pop up during this time, most notably the Familiar of Zero, it never reached the big mainstream outside of Japan. And while many web novel writers started out as fanfic writers for Familiar of Zero, they didn't shape the isekai world like Sword Art Online did. And as we enter the post-Sword Art Online world, more and more isekai light novels started to pop up. Popular titles such as Overlord, Log Horizon and the Saga of Tanya the Evil were all released as light novels, before the SAO anime had even been announced. And while each of them were popular in the light novel reading community, it wasn't until the animes began rolling out that people started to notice this new trend of storytelling. The term isekai was only reserved for either Japanese speakers who were using it literally as it just meant another world, or attentive international readers of light novels, since light novel titles with the term isekai in it began popping up with greater frequency during the run-up of the SAO anime. It became so noticeable that people on dedicated forums even started to notice the trend of isekai stories, some people even actively ignoring a light novel when they saw the word isekai in the title, as many of these stories seemed like cheap copies of one another. However, that didn't stop anime adaptations from isekai stories from becoming one of the most popular anime of their respective season or even year. However, it wasn't until 2016 when everything changed. Sure, while isekai anime have been released between SAO and 2016, some very big ones as well, it was only during 2016 that a new isekai came to the scene and blew every other isekai and anime out of the water. It was the dawn of Re:Zero. Re:Zero was an original take on the isekai genre that was now in full force. It follows a shut-in called Natsuki Subaru, who is suddenly transported from his regular world to a fantasy world with different races, magic, spirits and weird dragon carriages. Since transportation to a different world type of stories were now very commonplace in Japan, Subaru knew the rules. Or so he thought. But instead of becoming an overpowered protagonist that saves the girl, defeats the demon lord, he has no power, gets saved by the girl, and he himself becomes the demon lord. Well, okay, maybe not the last one. But the big thing about Re:Zero is its death mechanic. Whenever Subaru dies, he is set back to an earlier point in time. This inclusion helps making the show stand out from its peers. It allows for a high-stakes situation that can still go wrong. While I can describe the plot of Re:Zero, I, however, don't think I can tell you how big Re:Zero was for the isekai genre. The sheer size and popularity should speak for itself. When it came out, it was a 2-course 25-episode series that was consistently the most upvoted discussion thread on r/anime for 2 seasons, with the first season being the most popular and highest rated isekai on both anime list and AniList. And to add on top of all of that, Rem and Emilia, 2 characters from Re:Zero, are one of the most popular anime characters with the highest amount of anime figures out of almost any anime. And it was during this time as Re:Zero was airing that the term isekai started to be a known term within the anime community. It was being recognized as an official genre by many anime watchers. And the easiest way to show this difference is by going to Twitter. Yes, I know most of you hate Twitter, I do so as well, but the easiest way to see the change in human language is by observing how people talk online on an app literally meant to talk about their favorite topics. So what you're seeing right now is every mention of isekai from 2010 all the way to 2016. And what you can see from this is that the only time isekai is mentioned is when they mention a title of an anime with the word isekai in it. Now let's switch to from 2016 to 2017. Isekai is being name dropped a lot. We can see a lot of people talking about a genre called isekai. Every time you see a comment without an anime title, that is someone talking about the isekai phenomena. It is hard to pinpoint the exact reason why Re:Zero gave rise not just to the genre but to the term isekai as well, since we could have continued calling the series Otherworld series and I think no one would have complained. I think what helped with the rise of the use of this term was that the most popular example of it, Re:Zero in this case, had the word isekai in its name, since the full Japanese title of Re:Zero is Re:Zero Kaija Hajimeru Isekai Saiketsu. As a lot of people started to know about isekai, it was normal for organizations to not be far behind. Bookwalker added the isekai genre between 2016 and 2017, being one of the first to actually use isekai as a genre describing their light novels. After the first season of ReZero stopped airing, it didn't take long for people to get more anime like it. Konosuba had its second season right after, followed by Recreator and Overlord Season 2 coming not far behind it. It was in 2017 where Isekai really started to take off, a moment when Isekai became big. So big in fact that you could split it into several different subgenres. You got your cheat isekais, where someone gains a cheat skill that makes them overpowered in that world. You also have the type of stories where the main character does mundane work in another world, like farming or cooking. A game like isekais where the main character explores a virtual world either in virtual reality or the video game becoming real. You also have kingdom building isekai, where the main character uses their modern knowledge to improve the lives of the people around him or just their own lives. Or one of the more popular one, isekai parody, that expects you to know the clichés of isekai and tries to subvert them. But the three biggest subgenres are reincarnation, villainous and reverse isekai. Reverse Isekai has been around the longest. It is where the fantasy creatures come to our world. This plot device has been incorporated by a lot of the other Isekais like 12 Kingdoms or even Digimon, where the fantastical or digital creatures make their way to our side. However, most of the time when talking about a pure reverse Isekai, it is mostly about the main character being someone from a fantasy world coming to our world, with the main character reacting to the new modern setting, instead of having regular people reacting to fantastical monsters. In most reverse isekai, it is also the case that the main character isn't the only character that is transported to the modern world. Other people from his fantasy world are also coming and are likely the cause of trouble and cause of conflict. Popular reverse isekai examples are The Devil is a Part-Timer, Recreators and Dead Mount Dead Play. Another form of reverse isekai is having people of the olden day being summoned to modern day society. Think of your boy Kongming or the Fate franchise. Now, reincarnation wasn't originally a different subgenre, but more of a way for people to get isekai'd. However, as the genre kept evolving, it is hard to compare a lot of the modern reincarnation stories with your basic isekai stories. With reincarnation, the main character dies in the real world and gets reborn into another world. This can be as a human, but sometimes there's a twist, like being reborn as a monster or maybe just an item. These reincarnation stories often try to build the world by having the main character grow up in it, with popular examples of humans being reincarnated being Jobless Reincarnation, Faraway Paladin and Eminence in Shadow. These follow characters reborn in new human bodies where they get to relive their lives in a fantasy world and do it differently than they originally wanted to. However, as I said, other types of reincarnation stories have human characters being reborn in something other than a human, with That Time I Got Reincarnated as a Slime being the frontrunner of this genre, followed by So I'm a Spider So What as the two popular monster reincarnation stories, with Reincarnation as a Sword and Reborn as a Vending Machine being the two biggest item reincarnation stories. And lastly, there's the villainous type. While light novels have been around since 2014, the anime adaptations have only started to pop up in the last few years. Villainous type stories are for the most part meant for female audiences. They cover girls being sucked into their favorite otome games where they play as main antagonists of the story. Or, in other words, they are the villainess. While the start of the series are mostly the same, as in they reincarnate in the life of the villainess at a certain point and get to live the life of luxury as if they were the villainess themselves. The main goal is to survive the grueling fate that they know is coming due to the fact that they already played and finished the game. Popular examples of this are My Next Life as a Villainess and I'm a Villainess so I'm Taming the Final Boss. Of course, there's always a show or a light novel that mix and matches the above mentioned categories. Most villain animes are reincarnation stories, but not all. A lot of reincarnation turn into cheat skill power fantasies animes, and at some point more often than not, the isekai try to bring modern technology into the isekai world. More and more isekai are being released now than ever before. In an old video of Giguk, he talks about how many isekais there were back in 2017.
In recent times, it's been pretty hard to escape shows in the isekai genre, to the point where every season there always seems to be one or two new additions with variations to the premise.
One or two, and that was just 7 years ago. In winter 2024, while I'm recording this, 11 anime were airing that classify as isekai. 11. While the future of Isekai is uncertain, no one would doubt its stay for years to come. Isekai as a term is so integrated in society that whenever someone is traveling to a different world, people online are already saying that someone is isekai'd, even though it doesn't always fit the pre-existing idea of isekai. As isekai continues to grow, some even think that it might cross the sea and continents, as other countries will make stories involving elements of isekai. Hell, DC is almost exactly doing that with the Suicide Squad Isekai, although it's still written, directed and published in Japan. It is American property though, so it makes this a unique case, and who knows, maybe we will see more and more media incorporating this. It wouldn't surprise me at all if we have a Hollywood title within 10 years or so that has the term Isekai in it. As we reflect on the evolution of Isekai, it is important to notice that this isn't about quality, but a testament to the power of a simple, easily understandable premise. And to complete this video, I will be releasing 3 campaign videos later on about reincarnation, reverse isekai and otome villainous type stories. Since I wasn't able to fully dive into these subgenres, even though I do believe they deserve this kind of in-depth analysis. So stay in touch to be updated on these types of videos. I'm Durcoin, and thank you for watching.